First of all, it's a real pleasure for me to be here with you in this meaningful event. Actually, this event is called Celebrating Young Defenders, I think, but I'm not that young, actually. But if it works, I feel young, and thank you for accepting me among you.
Thank you for joining.
You told about our collective, our initiative. It's an initiative established in Paris with the aim of defending and promoting human rights, especially in Turkey. At the moment, we are working on Turkey, but in the future, we are going to work on other countries as well, maybe in the future. DDH means in French, Défense des droits de l'homme. It means defense of human rights. It comes from that. We created our collective in order to pronounce the human rights violations in Turkey to the French-speaking people. I mean the Francophone world. Because when you search through the internet regarding the human rights violations in Turkey, you can find plenty of resources in Turkish and in English, but not so many in French. And because of that, we acted. Our team mainly consists of lawyers, former diplomats, and political refugees from Turkey, like me. In this understanding, we are translating reports, articles, and papers from Turkish and English into French. We also publish monthly human rights reviews on Turkey in French as well. In our monthly reviews, there are different titles such as enforced disappearances, prison conditions, freedom of media, Kurdish minority, torture, and women's rights in Turkey. And also, we are trying to reach journalists, politicians, and NGO representatives in France and tell them about the situation in Turkey. We also organize protests in Paris, in different cities, in Strasbourg, where the European Court of Human Rights is located, with our team, actually, with our people, with our refugees from Turkey. In short, as a human rights organization, regardless of race, religious beliefs, social affiliation, or political views, we are trying to be the voice of all victims, oppressed people in Turkey.
Thank you very much, Rumi. And I have a question. Yesterday, the European Parliament took the decision to impose sanctions on Turkey, as you may know, but these were linked to Turkey's gas drills in Eastern Mediterranean and not about the grave human rights violations in the country. Do you find European Union sincere enough in supporting human rights in candidate countries?
Yeah, actually, that's a great problem. It's a good question. The general attitude of the European Union is a little bit disappointing for the oppressed people in Turkey. I mean, in general, we expect a lot from the EU, and it's not without reason. The EU has a lot of tools, instruments with which it may force Turkey to return to the rule of law. For instance, there is currently an economic crisis in Turkey, and Turkey needs the EU as a strong economic partner. Actually, it's a kind of interdependence relationship. They need each other, but I think Turkey needs more. Nevertheless, the EU preferred to turn a blind eye to what is happening in Turkey for more than 4 years, in my opinion. Turkey is also abusing the silence of the EU and blackmailing European countries with the refugee card. It uses it against the European countries. It reminds us the appeasement policy of the UK towards the Nazi regime before the Second World War, in my opinion. And we all know the dire results and consequences of that policy. Indeed, the European Union is so divided, and it always has been. Major European countries have their own policies towards Turkey. It may be understandable. We can understand that. But other organizations like the European Council and what about the European Court of Human Rights especially the European Council. It's an organization mainly with the aim of defending the human rights in member countries. But recently, we experienced the visit of Mr. Robert Spano, the president of the European Court of Human Rights, to Turkey. It was an official visit, and it caused much concern amongst Democrats, academics, and people who have suffered from the crackdown in Turkey, because it was neither a simple procedural visit nor a touristic visit. He received an honorary degree from Istanbul University, which had purged many academicians after the coup attempt in 2016. He also paid a visit to Mardin, southeastern city of Turkey, the hometown of Turkish judge there, Saadet Yüksel, Miss Saadet Yüksel, whose brother is also a former AKP deputy. And he met with AKP party Mardin Women's Group. They took a photo with him. And I think these were all messages from the Court of Human Rights. But on the other hand, he didn't pay a visit to the victims of the regime like Selahattin Demirtas, Osman Kavala, or Ahmet Altan, or their relatives. He ignored them. And we could not understand the aim of this visit by Mr. Spano. And it was the first official visit of him after he took office. I mean, there's a meaning of that. And the serious human rights violations, it was a time that the human rights violations in Turkey are defined as crime against humanity by several UN bodies. I mean, in their reports, it's defined as like this. But at that time, I mean, he can pay a visit to a country and they ignore the victims. I mean, the problem is broader than the EU. I think it's broader than that. But despite all, we keep our hope. And also this week, the EU global human rights sanctions regime, it was adopted. And I think it's a very good step in that regard. I hope that the EU stand up in a more tangible and direct way against the violations in Turkey. That's my hope. We will see it together.
Hopefully. Thank you very much, Rumi, for
thank you. And thank you for accepting me. Thank you very much.
Okay.